Today we're looking at the FPV Beetle. This is a hexacopter from GearBest. And this will be the first hexacopter that I've actually reviewed. I've seen quite a few of them, and I had one at one time, but I couldn't get it to fly very well. And it was one of my first quads, and I didn't really have any idea what I was doing, and so I kind of gave up on it. Well, it comes with the directions. Oh, it even comes with like a little book of directions. Wow, that's actually pretty cool. It says it's 300 millimeters here across from arm to arm, so we'll measure that here later. And pretty neat. It has a lot of instructions, and I think there's a lot of screws to put into this one. So we'll see. Alright, so as the book has this little bag of screws. Ooh, and this is the white version. So it comes with the top plate being white. I think there's also a red version. And it's a carbon fiber frame. And here are 6 arms. It is really, really strange to open this up and have 6 arms inside this thing. Camera mount, more spacers it looks like, some anti-vibration things. Alright, let me try to get this thing put together and we'll take a little bit closer look at it. So here are the components laid out, and this is a 5mm thick arm. If I go ahead and I measure this, you can see it's about 5.2 millimeters. Now it's not really 5.2 because it's been cut out on the inside of this arm a little bit, and if we look at what's been cut away, we've had about 3 millimeters cut away, so it's really a 2mm arm inside the middle. So if you're planning on what kind of screws you should use, probably 5mm would work. You don't want to do something like 7 because it would go clear through this and clear up into your motor windings. Now if we look at this kind of close, you can see here it's actually cut for 1806 or 1306 motors, and it's also cut with the little small holes for the 2200 series of motors. So you can run pretty much whatever you want on this, but they recommend 2300 1806 or 2300 2204 motors. But these landing gear here, they're also 5mm thick. And this is the cool part about this. When you're building this, it comes with a power distribution board, and the power distribution board is built into this middle plate. It has the connections out here for the ESCs, and also has connection in here for the battery and for more ESCs and more ESCs, because this is a hexacopter. The top plate here is kind of a plastic material, and it's 1.6 millimeters thick, and this other main plate here is 1.5 millimeters thick as well. Attaching these legs is kind of reminiscent of a Krieger frame. The legs look like this, and they have those 2 little gaps, and what you do is you put these screws in there, kind of like this, and like this. If I can get it in while I'm trying to record, like this, and then they're real tight. So I had to take a pair of pliers and put them on here and press them down in there, and there they got in. So at that point, they have to have little screws sticking up out of the top, like that, and then they slide through this power distribution board here on the bottom, and it kind of fits in kind of tight depending on how straight you got your screws. But then you have a place up on top where you put on the included nuts that come with it, and that gives you your landing gear. And all the landing gear points to the back. That way when you come in and land, it's not grabbing the ground and causing it bad problems. And like I said, these things are 5mm thick, so these are going to take a lot of wear, especially even in landing on concrete, they should take a lot of wear. Now I remember one more thing I didn't necessarily care for about hexes. You have 2 more arms, so you have 50% more screws to put in. Oh, anyway, I got all the arms in. Whew! Jeez. And these arms are bolted straight on to the power distribution board. So when the ESCs are on here, they'll just run right up to their little solder pads for the to get power for the ESCs. On this main plate, these 4 holes here are all kind of routed down a little bit or drilled down a little bit so you can have these flat washers and they don't stick up. Also, there's one back here, and you can kind of see it right there, how it's a little bit grooved down, and that's just so that these flathead washers will sit in there and not stick up. But on these, you're definitely going to want to use a lot of Loctite because there's not much screw coming down into these posts, into these spacers. And the bad thing about having those little short screws is that these things have a tendency to bend off and strip those little screws out. So the best thing you can do for yourself is make sure you put some blue Loctite on there to hold them into place. So I got this far along in the build, and I have this is all kind of together and this is together. Well, now the instructions say that this is supposed to lay on top of here, and the screws for each arm are supposed to go through here. That's 6 screws. I got to pull all those back out, rerun them all through here. Hexacopters, I tell you. So here I am several minutes later, and the arms are back installed, and all 12 screws are back in place. This part kind of reminds me of a ZMR 250 because you have the top plate and the bottom plate kind of mashing the arms in between to try to get some strength out of it that way. And then you have the top plate that sits up on the top like this. So the only thing that's kind of odd about this is the camera mount here. It actually mounts through this bottom plate and is actually attached up here on the top plate right here. And it's, I guess that's kind of nice. It allows this little plate to move just a little bit right here like this. And it doesn't really give it much up and down vibration control, but that's okay. I think it'll be all right. And this camera, or this quadcopter, is designed to have a board mount camera, and it has these 4 holes on these little pegs that mount up here on the front to hold your board camera. So let me go and get the rest of this put together. So here it is completely finished, and it looks really sharp. I like the hex look because I think this thing would be massively fast in a race. Even if you're using smaller 1806 motors that are, you know, notoriously a little bit weaker than the 2200s, having 6 of them is definitely going to make this thing a little stronger. Now there are some things that you kind of have to think about while you're building this. First of all, you don't see any place in here where you have access to those to the power distribution board, because the power distribution board is this bottom plate here, and all the connections are inside this on the top side. So when you run your motors on here, you put your motor here, have it connect to your ESC, have your ESC wires come down, and they got to drop down through this hole here. Then they can go in through the little slot that's under here and go in and connect to the power distribution board. So you kind of have to not have this top plate on and just have your arm sitting here with the screws kind of held through it just to hold it in place. Then solder your wires on, and then get all 6 wires soldered into the power distribution board. Then put the top plate down and solder and screw all these screws and nuts together. You also have to remember that your battery wire is back behind here too, so you'd have to have your battery connection pulled out for to power your power distribution board. And it looks like this is designed to hold your battery here. It has the little holders, the little battery strap cuts here to where your battery is going to sit inside here. Now this looks kind of small, but it probably hold a 2200, maybe up on end or something, or definitely a 1500 4S or 1600 4S. It would definitely hold. But then you'd have to hold it in there, like I said, with the battery strap. And this top plate being made of plastic, my initial thought was it probably wouldn't be very good being made of plastic. But really, if you think about it, all this is doing is just providing protection to the components down below. This doesn't need any real strength other than just to take a hit. And since there's no additional weight up on top of this, like a battery pushing on this plastic piece should be fine. And it's also, because it's plastic, you can also get this in different colors like white, and I think the other one is red. So we'll go ahead and get this frame weighed here, and let's make sure I can keep the numbers in the view of the camera. Looks like it comes in about 145.1. So let's go ahead and get this measured in between these 2 plates to see how much space we have. We have about, let me get lined up, there we go. About 27 millimeters or so in between the two upper plates. Now this does have enough room inside here on these nylon spacers for you to have a power distribution board with bent pins. If you have straight pins, I'm questioning whether or not you're going to hit this top plate. It looks to me like you would. Maybe you could mash your wires if you wanted to and get them to fit, but you'd probably be better suited with a bent pin flight board. So we'll go ahead and center this up here. The ruler is at the center of this motor hole, and over here to this side it looks like it comes up to be about 295 millimeters or so, which they said 300. They call this an LS-300. I'll buy it. 295 is close enough to 200. Also, it just dawned on me that this is a LisamRC quadcopter. LisamRC has been making a lot of frames recently, and this is just another one in there. So this is a Tyrant 180. This just came out here recently, and this 300 just really dwarfs it in terms of size. It is, it's kind of humorous to me because it's just so big, and I'm not used to seeing quadcopters or hexcopters like this with so many arms. So here's the LisamRC LS-300 sitting next to the GEFPV 240, and you can tell this thing is still a lot longer and a lot wider than this 240, which it should be because it is a 300. As far as props go, this is a 6-inch prop. And a 6-inch prop can spin past all the components in here, past the little spacer, which is really the only thing in the way. But it is going to pass underneath this top plate and above the bottom plate, which isn't really ideal. It can also spin just fine here. It can also spin just fine up here in the front. The problem is that, well, again, it's passing between here. The biggest problem you're going to have is that if you ran 6-inch props, they're going to touch between these two arms and between the rear arms too. These are 5-inch props here, and this one fits on the back plate just fine without hitting anything. It also fits up here in the front or in the middle, I guess, and it also fits up here in the front. And so 5-inch props is the biggest thing you're going to be able to run on here. The nice thing about these props is that they don't cross inside between these two plates. So you won't have any, you don't have to worry about your wires being real tight or real careful inside there, you know, from sticking out or anything and getting them caught in the propellers. So what kind of motors would be real good on this? Well, if you had 1806 motors, I think they'd be fine. They can spin 5-inch props real well. If you want a lot more power, you're gonna have to step up to something like a 2204 or 2205. And the Emax red bottoms are a good choice, and also the DYS SE 2205 motors are actually a good choice too. They're kind of DYS's response to the Emax motors, and I have a review coming up about those here soon. As soon as I get some time to build some of these quads. But you could put any 1806s would work good on here, the 2204s, 2205s, they'd all work good on here. And the fact that you have the 2 extra motors back here in the back, or wherever you'd say they were, helping pull the quad, it's actually going to be a lot more helpful because the motors are going to have, if you divide up how much weight each motor is going to have to pull, you're dividing it by 6 instead of just by 4. So having a little bit heavier frame is okay because of the 6 motors. Now, if you had the 2204s or the 2205s, you're going to have a lot more low-end thrust. And on a hexacopter, I think it's just going to be even more insane when you use those strong motors than on a quad, just because you got 6 of them pulling you through the air. One other good reason to go with 1806 motors is just because they aren't going to draw the amps that a 2200 motor can draw. An 1806 motor, even on 4S, is only going to draw about 10 to 12 amps. So if you had 10 amp draw times 6, you're only talking 60 amps of withdrawal. If you got 6 times 12, you're talking like 72 amps of withdrawal off your battery. And a lot of batteries can handle that pretty easily, especially if you're getting up to like 65C rated batteries in the 1300. They could probably handle it, although if I was actually going to do that, I would probably buy something like a 1500 and 65C rating, just because then it would, you know, handle it a little bit even better. So let's take one more good close-up look at this frame. Like I said, a hexacopter would be a lot of fun just because that 6th motor would be fun. The only problem you're going to have is maybe some tuning, just because there's not a lot of people that fly hexes, and so the tuning might be a little bit more difficult. If you're not real good at tuning, then find one of your friends that is, or join a Facebook group of people who have hexes, and I'm sure you could get it to work. The oh yeah, also these legs here, I think they hold it up high enough that your battery's not gonna, you're not gonna land on your battery, which is good. And also, the having this plate cut away a little bit helps let the battery go up a little bit, which helps center the center of gravity a little bit more than it would if it was down a little bit. But this frame, I think it looks really cool, and just so many arms. And if you actually took this out to a race, I think a lot of people would you'd get a lot of attention from people, just because people haven't seen a lot of hexes being built, and I haven't seen any show up at the races yet. But we did have one guy who lived about an hour from me, he said, oh, I'm going to bring my hex. I'm going to blow all you guys away. It won't even be fair. Well, I was kind of looking forward to him coming, but he never did. And I'm still hoping he shows up one of these days. But I think a hex does have a potential of having a lot of power to it. The only downside is, like I said before, you got 6 motors, so you have about 50% more cost there. You got 6 ESCs, 50% more cost there. You have to have a flight board that can handle 6 inputs plus a power input, unless you kind of hack it together so your ESC wire puts power into it also. So you have to look at something like an F3 board or something like that with the 8 pins in, with the 8 input pins instead of only 6. So here's the specs on the side of the box. And you can see over here, they're recommending a battery of 3S 1500 to 2200. Now most racing quads most people run them with 1300 milliamp hour batteries. But you got to remember that this is a hex and not a quad. On a quad, if you have 4 20 amp ESCs, that's going to be a maximum draw of juice about 80 amps. Now on a hex, you got the 2 extra 20 amp ESCs. So now you're going to have 20 times 6. So you're looking at 120 amps on the max draw. And so you can either get more amps out of your battery by increasing the C rating or increasing the capacity, the milliamp hours. And in this case, it looks like they're recommending just larger milliamp hour batteries. That way, the amp draw on this will be handled by that and you won't burn up your batteries. One other funny thing, this is the name of the product is Beetle. So the LS-300 LisamRC, this thing, I don't think the pictures on the website do this justice, because on the website it looks like a plain hexacopter, it looks, you know, fair, but in person this thing is really cool looking. And also the I see it now, LisamRC, goodness gracious, how did I miss that? FPV Beetle from LisamRC. I think this is a cool quad. Maybe if I get crazy I'll build out one of these hexes, but it's gonna be crazy if I do. Anyway, if you have any questions about this, leave them in the comments. I'll try to help you out. If you want to know any more measurements I didn't give you, let me know. I'll measure it up for you. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.